本會現在恢復2013年空氣污染管制修訂第2號條例草案嘅二讀辯論。審議上述條例草案委員會主席梁繼昌議員就委員會嘅報告向本會發言。梁繼昌議員。
Mr. President, in my capacity as chairman of the Bills Committee on Air Pollution Control, Amendment Number 2 Bill 2013, I now address the Council on the work of the Bills Committee. The object of the bill is to amend the Air Pollution Control Ordinance, hereinafter APCO, so that unless exempted, the use, supply, import, and transshipment of asbestos and asbestos-containing materials are prohibited. It also proposes to amend the Factories and Industrial Undertakings Asbestos Regulation to prohibit any work with chrysotile to be conducted in an industrial undertaking and to increase the penalties for certain offences which relate to the use of or working with asbestos. Mr. President, the Bills Committee has held 5 meetings with the administration and has invited the public and various organizations to give views on the bill. A total of 15 organizations have either made oral presentations or written submissions to the Bills Committee. I shall now turn to the major issues deliberated by the Bills Committee. Whilst supporting the legislative intent of the bill, the Bills Committee has examined the likely impact of the proposed ban on the industry players and the exemptions to be provided under the proposed sections 83 and 82, despite the ban on using, supplying, importing, and transshipping asbestos or ACM under the proposed new section 80. The administration advises that, given the availability of the asbestos-free substitutes, the import and export of asbestos-containing material, hereinafter ACM, have declined in the past 5 years. The Bills Committee has taken note of the administration's estimate that the impact on the trade will be minimal. The proposed Section 83, subsection 1, provides that the authority may exempt a person from a prohibition imposed under Section 80, subsection 1, if the authority considers that the exemption is warranted and would be unlikely to lead to a health risk to the community. The Bills Committee has requested the administration to explain the factors that would be considered in granting the exemptions. The administration, in response, has advised that, in considering whether an exemption is warranted under Section 83(1)(a), the authority, that is the Director of Environmental Protection, will take into account a number of factors, including whether an asbestos-free substitute is available, whether there will be serious disruption to a public service if the application for exemption is not granted, and whether there will be serious safety problem or risk to human life if the application for exemption is not granted. As regards the factors to be considered under the proposed Section 83(1)(b), the administration points out that the authority will take into account of the quantity of the asbestos or ACM involved, the precautionary measures to be taken to prevent release of asbestos into air, the location and activity involved, and the likelihood that asbestos or ACM involved will be disturbed. At the request of the Bills Committee, the administration has agreed to upload the information on the factors that would be considered in granting the exemption onto the website of EPD for the information of the public. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, the Bills Committee has also examined the non-application of the prohibition under the proposed Section 82 sub 3 to import, supply, or transshipment of ACM, that is a proprietary Chinese medicine, hereafter PCM, being registered under the Chinese Medicine Ordinance. On members' queries over the safety of taking such PCM containing ACM, the administration has explained that according to expert opinions obtained, there is different pharmacological mechanism between the inhalation of asbestos and ingestions of asbestos, though asbestos is a proven carcinogen, which can cause asbestosis, lung cancer, and mesothelioma when inhaled. Whether ingested asbestos will accumulate in the body and is carcinogenic has to make reference to authoritative international research. The administration explains that according to findings published by the World Health Organization, WHO, of the International Agency for Research on Cancer, studies on exposure to asbestos in drinking water and stomach, large intestine and colon cancer have concluded that the available data were inadequate to evaluate the cancer risk of asbestos in drinking water. Also, according to WHO, there is little evidence of the carcinogenity of ingested asbestos in epidemiological studies of populations with drinking water containing high concentrations of asbestos. WHO is of the view that there is no consistent evidence that ingested asbestos is hazardous to health. Based on the above findings, the administration does not consider it necessary to ban registered PCM with ACM. The Bills Committee notes that as of November 2013, there are a total of 36 PCM registered in Hong Kong, which contains tremolitum, a kind of asbestos used in traditional Chinese herbal medicine for a long time. The administration has advised that these unused PCM should be disposed of according to the mechanism provided in the Waste Disposal Ordinance. Ordinary citizens could return those unused PCM to the drugstores, which will handle them accordingly. Another issue that the Bills Committee has examined is the existence of ACM in buildings which were built before the 1980s, when corrugated asbestos cement sheets were commonly used in construction. In view of the harmful nature of the asbestos fiber to human health, the Bills Committee urges the administration to conduct a territory-wide asbestos survey of all the buildings in Hong Kong. Some members propose to introduce a labeling system for ACM in building structures or to set up a platform to publicize the list of buildings which have ACM. The administration, however, stresses that CACs, if in good condition and under normal circumstances, will not release asbestos fibers and thus pose no health risk to the residents or the public. It is suggested that in case a detailed asbestos survey is conducted, sampling work will inevitably disturb the ACM and asbestos fibers may be released as a result. Since ACM is safe under normal and undisturbed circumstances, the administration considers that conducting a territory-wide survey on ACM in building is not the most appropriate method. As regards the suggestion of labeling all ACM in buildings, the administration also indicates that as the presence of ACM can only be ascertained after sampling and testing, and some such material may be concealed inside building structure and surface installations and are not easily found and accessible. Its presence can only be ascertained after assessment on the spot by a registered asbestos consultant. Taking account of the resources implications, property rights issue, professional and analytical capacity of the asbestos trade, the administration expresses reservation in introducing a labeling system for ACM in building structures. In this connection, Mr. President, the Bills Committee has raised concerns that certain workers employed by the subcontractors, in particular the newcomers, might not fully understand the hazards of asbestos fibers when carrying out demolition works of structures containing ACM. The Bills Committee has requested the administration to step up the related publicity work. The Bills Committee also notes that the Environmental Protection Department has planned to work with Pneumoconiosis Compensation Fund Board, PCFB, to publish a booklet about ACM to help the public and the workers better understand and identify the presence of ACM. Besides, the Labour Department, in collaboration with the Occupational Safety Health Council and PCFB, have been organizing various publicity, education and promotion activities to raise the awareness of construction workers, contractors and the general public on asbestosis and preventive measures so as to avoid or reduce the chance of getting the disease. The Bills Committee has also examined some of the Chinese rendition of the English text and the impact of the bill on other legislative requirements relevant to the use of or working with asbestos, and has come to the conclusion that no consequential amendments to the bill and relevant sections of the Hazardous Chemicals Control Ordinance and the Air Pollution Control Ordinance are necessary. Mr. President, the Bills Committee supports the second reading of the bill. Neither the administration nor the Bills Committee will move any committee stage amendments. The following part of my speech carries my personal comments on the bill. Mr. President, having been chairman of a number of Bills Committee since I became a member of the Council, there are a number of general observations on the quality of the bills tabled by the government, which I would like to draw to the attention of the administration, my fellow honourable members and the public. Now, these are issues raised in the Bills Committee, but have much wider implications on the general approach and quality of the draft legislation tabled by the administration. First of all, it is the quality of the Chinese rendition of the English text in the draft bill which causes the concern of some of our members. Take this bill as an example. Members have raised two separate queries on the Chinese rendition of two English texts, including, for example, the term "and could not have reasonably known." Mr. President, it is as important to use plain, intelligible, clear, and predictable language in the Chinese rendition as well as the English text. In addition, the Chinese rendition used should reflect the idiomatic and local use of Chinese language and a good tradition of common law. Secondly, Mr. President, very often in the main legislation, an authority or a public officer will be given discretion either to grant exemption or exception. As a rudimentary requirement, such power, no doubt, must be exercised in good faith and for the purpose of the legislation. However, citizens who are going to rely on the piece of legislation will have a legitimate expectation of how such power is going to be exercised. It is therefore paramount that where the context of a legislation permits, criteria for exercising such power must be contained in the principal legislation or the subsidiary legislation. If the discretion is of a minor nature, then it is more appropriate to be spelled out in the principle or the subsidiary legislation, and our members will expect the administration to issue practice note or guidance to the stakeholders. Thirdly, Mr. President, due to the difficulties in time which a principal legislation or an amendment to a principal legislation may encounter or take in order to pass through the readings in this Council, I personally feel that administration from time to time may try to take shortcut in pushing through legislation and trying to cut short or circumvent the independent scrutiny and approval power of this Council. In particular, the administration may try to recharacterize the nature of an amendment by squeezing changes to a subsidiary legislation rather than putting the changes in the principal legislation, and similarly by issuing code of conduct or guidelines where the principal legislation permits rather than amending the legislation, the subsidiary legislation. This act, I think, will not only heavily damage the function and power of this Council, but the fairness and quality of the legislative proposal. Mr. President, I have made this very clear, and that such practice of circumventing the Council's power should not be tolerated. Thank you, Mr. President.